The U.S. and European Union are running out of time to strike a deal on trade tariffs, and analysts say several key sticking points could make an agreement impossible. Negotiations have been slow since both the U.S. and EU temporarily cut duties on each other until July 9th. If a deal is not agreed by then, full reciprocal import tariffs of 50% on EU goods and the bloc's wide-spanning countermeasures are set to come into effect. "We're talking, but I don't feel that they're offering a fair deal yet," U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters Tuesday, further dashing hopes of an imminent agreement. So what's holding things up between the two sides, which had a relationship worth €1.68 trillion, $1.93 trillion, in 2024? One bone of contention flagged by experts was the EU's regulation of especially big tech companies. The bloc has faced regular criticism from the U.S. after imposing landmark rules on tech giants regarding transparency, competition, and moderation. Trump's administration actively seeks to use trade negotiations to force the EU to capitulate and weaken the regulatory environment. Alberto Rizzi, policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, told CNBC. However, to Europeans, any interference into its domestic regulation of digital platforms is not acceptable and would run counter to its commitment to fight disinformation and hate speech, he added. Philip Luck, director of the economics program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, echoed the concerns, but said the EU could potentially surrender some ground without undermining their principles. But the parties haven't gotten down to that level of conversation yet, he said. Taxes are another major area of disagreement between the U.S. and the EU, Rizzi said, noting that Trump sees tariffs as accounting for supposedly unfair taxes placed on U.S. companies and goods by European countries. That includes so-called value-added taxes, or VAT, which are levied on each stage of the supply chain as a product's value changes. While very common globally, the U.S. doesn't operate VAT, and Trump has billed it as a trade barrier and a justification for tariffs. However, the EU value-added tax treats domestic and foreign goods exactly in the same way, and in Europeans' eyes, taxation is a purely domestic issue that should not be part of any trade discussion, Rizzi said. Taxation is a red line for the EU in trade discussions. A much broader issue between Washington and Brussels appears to be a fundamental lack of trust and alignment on negotiations and their goal. Jacob Kierkegaard, non-resident senior fellow with the Peterson Institute for International Economics, went as far as saying that, quote, "There's only really one sticking point, which is that Trump wants tariffs on the EU, and the EU is not having it." CSIS's Luck struck a similar tone, flagging that, philosophically, the U.S. and EU have starkly different views going into the talks. This U.S. administration views these negotiations through a lens of how partners can concede to concessions to help us. They do not view this as a traditional reciprocal trade conversation, where we give something and they give something, he explained. The EU has a much more traditional view, he said, as demonstrated by its zero-for-zero tariff suggestion, which faced pushback from the White House. European politicians are proud people who think of themselves as being on an equal footing to the United States, who can't make constant concessions. Nor do they feel like they should have to, Luck said.